My story of Grandpa was when I was at BYU, and Grandpa called me up. It was in March, and we did this pretty much every year. He was coming up for conference, and we always go camping on conference weekend. I remember Grandpa called me this year and said, "Brig, let's go camping." And I said, "Okay," just like I always did. Christina and I were dating. No, we were engaged at the time. And I remember Grandpa called up, said, "Hey, Brig, let's go camping." I said, "Okay, let's go." Well, as the date came closer, we were planning on going in April, beginning of April. I remember it was like the week before, and I looked at the forecast, and the weather said it was going to get down to 10 degrees or some ridiculously low number like that. And I just didn't want to go. It didn't sound fun to sit and sleep in 10-degree weather. So I called Grandpa a week before or something, and he was on his way up. And I remember I called him and said, "Hey, Grandpa, have you looked at the forecast? It's going to be freezing cold. I don't know if I really want to go camping." And he started in, "Well, Brig, you just take a sleeping bag, you take your jacket, it's going to be fine. We're going to be warm, we're going to have fun." He was very, very, very adamant about going camping. I thought that was kind of weird. Like, normally I figured if I told Grandpa I didn't want to go, he'd just say, "Okay, well, we can go another time," and that would be that. But he was so adamant about camping, and it was a month before my wedding that I figured, okay, well, maybe Grandpa has some great life lesson that he wants to teach me, and he wants to do it on this camping trip. It can be kind of this grandfather, grandson relationship and moment that he's planning on having with me. And I figured, that'll be really cool. That's worth it. I can handle 10-degree weather for one night in exchange for this awesome learning lesson from Grandpa. Well, we go camping, and the forecast didn't change. It was still supposed to be super cold. And we get up there, we set up our tent, we set up his hammock, we build a fire, we start cooking, we get camp all together, and everything's ready, everything's great. We eat dinner, and by this time it was about 9 o'clock. The sun was starting to go down. It was getting pretty dark. And I remember Grandpa was just kind of standing there, and I thought, okay, this is the moment. This is where Grandpa's going to sit me down, talk to me, and share the lesson that he wanted to teach me. And I was super excited, ready for it. And then right then, Grandpa looked at me, and he said, "Well, good night, Brig. I'm going to bed. See you in the morning." And I remember thinking, are you kidding me? I'm going to sleep here tonight without getting any of this lesson from Grandpa. And I laid in bed that night, and it got down to, I think, 6 degrees, and laid there freezing cold, wishing I had heard my lesson from Grandpa, which I never got. And we woke up the next morning, and Grandma had pulled a prank on Grandpa, so we came back to camp early. And long story short, I never got any kind of motivational words from Grandpa, any kind of lesson, absolutely nothing. Just a really great memory of a cold camping trip with Grandpa. So that's the memory I wanted to share.
So the story I want to share about Grandpa was when it was Father's Day, and Brig and I wanted to tell everyone that we were pregnant. We hadn't told any family yet, except my mom and Brig's mom, and they were in on the secret, so his mom was going to help us tell everyone. And we got Dad a book, and it said how to babysit a grandpa, and that was how we were going to tell him that we were pregnant. And Grandpa was there, and Scott and Liza were there, and Trey was there. He had just gotten back from his mission. And we gave Dad the book, and at first he didn't get it, but Grandpa got it and just jumped up. He was sitting on the ottoman, and he just jumped up and he said, "I am so excited. This is the best day. I've been waiting 40 years to be a great grandpa." And it was just a really good memory that I have of him. And then he told us that his great grandma and grandpa were in the Martin Willis handcart company, and his great grandpa was rescued by his great grandpa, and that's how they met. And so he said, "I just have always admired them and thought it was so cool and could not wait until I was going to be a great grandpa." And so yeah, that was a really good memory.
Daughters make weather feathers. Butters make rubbers. Yeah, feathers. Daughters make weathers.
My memory of Grandpa is once during the Golden Knights hockey season. They were in the playoffs, and it was after one of the games, and Grandpa called me the next day and told me that he and Grandma had stayed up that night and listened to it on the radio while they were up at the cabin in Pine. And it was really cool for me to hear because we got to talk about hockey and talk about the playoffs. And I realized that Grandpa didn't ever really probably care very much about hockey, but he cared about it because I cared about it. And I was really appreciative of that.
Okay, so me and Grandpa were going camping at the river, and we got there and he went over, and after we'd set up and everything, he told me that we needed to go and get some firewood. So I was expecting to go over to some kind of store around there and just get a pack of firewood or find some trees, dead trees. But Grandpa pulls over to the woods, walks out about 100 yards, grabs a chainsaw out of his truck and starts cutting down trees and chopping them up. And then we went back to camp and we took an axe and we chopped them and then we burned them in fire. So that's my memory about Grandpa.
One of my favorite memories of Grandpa is hiking the Grand Canyon with him, and I remember it was probably 5 summers ago. He took us to hike rim to rim, and he told us that we needed to wear long sleeve shirts and long pants. But it was in June, and it was going to be very, very hot in the Grand Canyon, like probably 100 degrees in like the main part, because you hike down and then you hike straight and up, and so the main level is going to be 100 degrees. But he said wear a long sleeve shirt and a long pants. And so I did not consider that. I didn't do that. I wore a short sleeve shirt and short shorts because I didn't want to be so hot while I was hiking all day. And we got through like that middle flat part and started hiking up again, and it was in sand. And I remember I sat down on a rock and I started crying because I didn't want to hike anymore because it was so hot and I was so tired. And Grandpa just kept hiking past me and he wouldn't stop. And I thought to myself, why won't Grandpa stop hiking? Can't he just take a break for a minute? We've been hiking all day and he hasn't sat down at all. And I found out later that he was frustrated that I hadn't worn the long sleeve shirt and the long pants, and that I would have been cooler if I had. But mostly what I learned from that is that Grandpa was very tough and he had a very strong mind, and whenever he would put his mind to something, he would do it. Like if he's gonna hike the Grand Canyon rim to rim, he was going to do it. And he not only did it, but he did it the best way possible by wearing the long sleeve shirt and the long pants to protect him from the sun. So I'm grateful for those lessons that he taught me about diligence and hard work.
One of my favorite things about Grandpa was the first time I met him was at the Nilsson's new house here in St. George, and probably the third thing he said to me was in Indonesian. Haley was standing right next to me at this point. We'd been dating for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Grandma was next to him on this side, and he was just talking to me in Indonesian, and he just said, "So, when are you getting married?" And just from right then on, I just knew that Grandpa was a no-nonsense, actions speak louder than words type of guy. And everything that he did for me and all of my interactions with him were mainly we act and then talk if necessary, but actions are more important than words. And that just kind of spoke volumes to me, and it's a great lesson.
My favorite memory of Grandpa Jensen is when he told all of us to memorize the Attitude poem by Charles Swindoll, because I feel like when you have a good attitude, then everything else goes great in your life, and Grandpa always taught that, and I'm really grateful for him teaching us that, and I love him.
My favorite memory of Grandpa is going hiking out in the Arizona deserts, and we had some good times, just me and him one-on-one, and that's about it.
I'll always remember Grandpa for being such a positive and motivational person. He was a go-getter and he never gave up, and I love that quote where it's stick to the task till it sticks to you, beginners are many, finishers are few. And every time I think of that, I always think of Grandpa Jensen, because he always sticks to the task. When he starts something, he finishes it, and that's something that I love about Grandpa and his determination. And I also love that he didn't say much, but he did a lot through his actions, and he was always helping other people, and see how he could fix something in our house. And whenever they would come visit, we would, my mom would have stuff for him to do. And he's just a busy person. He doesn't really, he's off doing something, helping someone else. And that's something that I love about Grandpa and that I'll always remember him for. And I'm super grateful for him.
Okay, so 2 summers ago, Hiram and I were able to spend like 2 weeks or so down in Mesa with Grandma and Grandpa, and he and Grandpa and I were going on we went on a backpacking trip, and it was really cool. I just remember feeling like protection and like help from him, because I knew that I'd be safe through the night and stuff, and that he would keep us he would guide us and help us.
So grateful for Grandpa because of how nice and willing to take us anywhere. And one of my greatest memories of Grandpa was when we lived in American Fork, and Grandpa would take me, Nate, Mallory, Blake, and Rhett to the dollar store, and he'd always take us there and buy us fun toys. And then I'm always grateful for how loving and willing to make sure that we're having fun Grandpa is.
And some of my favorite memories with Grandpa are just being outdoors with him, like all the hikes we went on. And I remember we went camping with him in Arizona once, and he taught me how to rappel and just all the fun things with him. I remember hiking the Grand Canyon, and he went and kissed a mountain goat, and he's always just been so fearless and fun.
One of my favorite memories with Grandpa was when he would come up to our house and we'd go to the General Conference Center to watch it, and it was really fun with him just to see that side and get to spend some time with him.
My favorite memory of Grandpa is when he'd show us the bird cage, and I'd always look forward to that.
My favorite memory was when we went camping and Grandpa made the log chairs and the log table.
My favorite memory about Grandpa is last week when he taught us how to shoot a real bow and arrow at the cabin.
Oh, that's so cool. And then did he come back here? And did you do another bow and arrow set?
Yeah, and we did it just me and Grandpa.
Oh, that's so awesome, bud. And tell me a little bit about it.
And I kept getting the red part, and I kept almost getting the yellow part.
You did? Grandpa helped you and he showed you how to do it?
And I got all the parts except the yellow part.
Oh wow, that's so cool. How did Grandpa teach you how to hold the bow and the arrow at the cabin?
Well, I already knew how.
What did he tell you about using a bow and arrow? Do you remember?
Well, that the arrow goes somewhere, and then you pull the arrow and part the string of the arrow back, and then as far as you can when you let go. When I got a prickle in my feet, I really hurt it, but then we went to the cabin and Grandpa got it out.
Yeah, did it make you feel so much better?
Yeah.
Did it hurt when you got it out?
No.
And then what did he give you? Did he give you a little kit of things you could have in case you got hurt? Remember he gave you your first aid kit?
I love Grandpa.
I love Grandpa. So, my favorite thing with Grandpa is to go to the Air and Space Museum.
And what did you go see at the Air and Space Museum? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Did he take you to see the Wright brothers exhibit?
Yeah.
Who were they?
I don't know.
What did they do? What did they build?
A plane.
An airplane? The first airplane?
Mm-hmm.
And what did Grandpa tell you about them?
They filled the whole coin to see who's going to do it first.
Who's going to fly the plane first?
Yeah.
Oh, Grandpa told you that?
What I like to do with Grandpa, Grandpa let me stay at his hotel, and
go to breakfast with Grandpa?
Yeah.
And did Grandpa tell you stories?
Yeah. And we also do. We go somewhere and we went on the train. That's the things that we do.
You got to go on the train with Grandpa?
Yeah.
And you
Grandma.
liked that? And Grandma?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's all the things that I love to do.
Oh, good.
Hi. How you doing? You want to come see Dada? Oh, boy. Oh, he's second. Oh, he's second. What's Mama doing?
Grandpa taught me a lot about construction, and while working with him up at the cabin, I learned a lot about his character and the type of person that he is.
Grandpa was always really hardworking, and whenever he put his mind to something, he could always get it done no matter what it was. And he was really funny, always. He brought joy to everyone.
I like how Grandpa is so kind and how he's a really hard worker.
He's a hard worker.
What else did you like about Grandpa?
He doesn't give up.
What does Grandpa call you?
Funny boy.
Funny boy? Yeah. And what else do you like about Grandpa? Funny boy? And where does Grandpa live now?
For Jesus.
Yeah, Grandpa lives with Jesus.
About Grandpa, cause you coming to our house and we sitting on the rattled and waiting for you guys to come on. And I have the biggest one. Yeah. And Jacob have a little one. And I have the biggest one ever. And Grandpa have an even bigger one. Robert.
How about when you were here last time and Mommy had to leave and Grandpa took you rock climbing? What did you do with Grandpa? And the bubble bath? Can you talk about that?
I love to do that. I like going all the way in. And I like going all the way to Rio.
Is that what Grandpa did? He put you in a bubble bath all the way to
Yeah.
So translation for what Brady just said. But Mom and I went shopping one day, and Grandpa was watching the boys, and he didn't know when we were coming home, and so he got the boys, I guess. Well, we pulled in, we opened the garage, and when we opened the garage, Grandpa was sitting on this tall ladder, Brady was sitting on a medium-sized ladder, and Jacob was sitting on the smallest ladder. And I guess they'd been sitting there for like a half hour waiting for us to come back. So he had just sat and told stories to try to keep them on their ladders that whole time until we came back. Anyway, Brady loved it. Can you tell me something that you remember about Grandpa?
He got old.
He got old?
Yeah.
But can you tell me about something that you remember that was fun with Grandpa?
Yeah.
What?
He had rockets.
You made rockets?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And what else did you do with Grandpa? Do you remember what else you did with Grandpa that day? That last time we went to Arizona? You were able to be with him?
We were Ellie.
You played with Ellie? Do you remember that he took you to the jumpy place? Yeah. He did? Why do you love your Grandpa so much?
That was great.
Cause what? What?
To Mama.
Cause you could see Grandma?
Yeah.
Can you say, I love you, Grandpa?
Why, Papa?
Say, I miss you.
Met you.
Say, I can't wait to see you again.
You ding.
Walk back over. Stand up. Oh, seriously. How'd you do this?
Can you watch me?
Grandma comes to watch the big game. I get off the airplane. Of course, she comes running up to me and wants to give me a hug, and I'm just standing there like, you're not going to hug me. I'm the missionary. She's like, oh! so we go home, and she's thinking, why did I ever come? I mean, I don't think he likes me, But I hadn't been released yet. Yeah, I just got home. She was in the car with me, and so we go to my house, and I call the state president, and I say, I need to come home, when can I come get released? And he says, well, I'm at the state center now, you can come down. So I said, your grandma, you want to go with me? I mean, before then, there was no restrictions, they didn't tell you had to be with anybody. I said, you want to go with me? And she said, sure. And so we just kind of did small talk, on the way. And then she's sitting in the lobby, and I'm going in, and I'm talking to the state president, getting released. And I say, now there's this girl out here that's waiting for me. Now, we've kind of been dating before my mission. I said, how long do you think I ought to wait before I decide to get married? He says, well, Elder, I can't tell you that. He says, that's when the Spirit tells you. It might be weeks, months, it may be, I don't know. He says, that you just go on what the Spirit says. I'm serious. Of course, I haven't done anything for 2 years, so I walk out, and there she is sitting on the couch, and I'm looking at her, and I'm thinking, wow. And so I grab her hand, we walk outside the doors, and I grab her and give her the biggest kiss. And we got engaged that night.
Oh, Grandpa! Dad, I like when you say, well, when I walked out, the Spirit told me.
I just felt it really strong.
Yeah.
But he didn't even ask her, will you marry me? They just started planning out there. No, what happened was, we went home, and we said, we need to talk, and so then we walked down the street, and we turned, he was with us. Somebody got this woman.
I've been there.
Sweet. Yeah.
I was Berkeley, you were with them?
No.
Picture them
sitting on the same curb.
Yeah.
Where he proposed. Not on 28th Street, that's by Santa Barbara. So we walked down on the curb, and we said, because, as you know, Grandma Hooks didn't like me, because I was in Las Vegas. Not 28th Street. This is the one over by Santa Barbara. By where Home Depot.
So where is this in Mesa? Where this is Las Vegas. Okay.
So I was accepted to go to BYU, and so was Grandma accepted to go to BYU, and she was going to go to ASU, and I got accepted to go to ASU, but I said, she said, my mother will not let me go to BYU. Why not? Because you'll be there. She said, you can't do it. She said, I got to go to ASU. And I said, well, the only problem with ASU is that I can't afford to pay the out-of-state tuition. Can't you come here and go to Nevada Southern at that time, which is called UNLV? She says, no, she won't let me come here and go to school. I said, well, will she let you come here and stay with your aunt and work like you did before? And she says, no, she won't. I said, well, what are we going to do? We have to be able to date. And she said, I don't know what we're going to do. And I said, I know what we can do. Let's just get married. And then she gave me the biggest kiss. So she never said yes. Was that in the car or on the porch or what? That was sitting on the curb.
That was on the curb.
On the curb.
Sally, is this yours?
It's a little cul-de-sac right there, 5 minutes from our house. So we proposed on the curb. Outside. I didn't propose. I said, I know what we can do. Let's just get married. Let's get married. That's a proposal.
Oh.
Yeah. I never heard that part of it. I like that better.
That's the best time I've ever heard that story.
Yeah.
I've heard the story, but that was a great story. I don't know if I've ever heard you tell the story. Okay, maybe that's right.
Then after we were engaged, and we were driving down on Charleston one day, we came to the stop sign at Bowman Highway in Charleston. And she looked at me and she said, you never proposed to me. And I said, will you marry me? She said, yes. How long later was that? Oh, a couple weeks later.
How cute. That could be a movie.
When did you get the ring? After that, I just got off the mission. I didn't have any money. We went to a pawn shop on Charleston. There was a place called Vegas Village. It was like Smitty's or well, what's before Smitty's? Like a Smith's drugstore that sells, or like Walmart, that sells.
That's where you got a ring?
We went there, and her ring and my ring both was $125.
Oh.
Wow. And I had $25 to pay down. So I went to the credit union with the church ring, and I said, I need to borrow $100 to buy a ring. He said, well, what collateral do you have? And I said, what do you mean, what collateral do I have? I'm just got off mission. I don't have any assets. He said, well, I can't loan you any money then, unless your dad co-signs you. I said, really? You just can't take my word for it? And this man was in the state presidency, that ran the credit union. And he said, listen, he said, if you were asking me as a friend, yeah, I just probably loan you $100, but I have a business here. This is a business, and we don't loan money without documentation. He said, what happens if you were to die next week, or I were to die next week, and I didn't have any kind of documentation? We have to have documentation because we have regulators that oversee our credit union. So if you don't have any assets, then I got to get a co-signer like your dad. And my dad co-signed, and he loaned us $100, and we had to pay $10 a month to pay off our payments for 12 months. So we paid it off in 10 months because we had over $100.
I need to get one of those.
She always comb your hair.
Always.
Mom,
She doesn't like the way I comb it.
you
Do
still
you?
have your fingernails on
Well,
the table.
Sterling, can you just fix him instead of making such a big deal of it?
Well, I just want.
I think I would shave my head before I let Tracy comb my hair.
Sterling, let me tell you what I did yesterday, and it would really gross you out.
Come on. Cook the
No.
hair.
No. Are you listening to this?
What?
I was making pizzas for 100 people, and I had just polished my fingernails the night before, and all of a sudden I saw that pink stuff all over the dough.
Oh, really?
And I looked at my fingernails, and because of the oil in the dough, my fingernail polish chipped off on all the dough.
Hey,
So,
are you gonna
hold
do
this. No, I want you to just relax.
Are you getting this film, Brig?
Yep.
Well, he combs it first, and it dries, and then it doesn't do right. So if he lets me do it right after he washes it, then it's a lot better. But it's kind
Yeah, look how she just whipped my head around.
of weird.
Like I'm a mannequin.
You are. You're like this perfect man. I mean, most people this age have no hair. Just look
Most
at this
people that
beard.
age know how to comb their hair.
Exactly. That's true.
I can comb my hair, but
He can comb his hair.
but I
Every morning when you get up,
No, but when he goes to places, I always do it for him.
like,
I always comb my hair. But
Like,
I like
as
the
a
way I comb my
mission
hair.
president, his hair was always combed.
Okay, you
That's
done?
how come it looks good.
I have to take my glasses
Oh,
off because otherwise it gets sprayed with the hairspray.
I like that linen
I get hairspray all over.
Just don't, what do I say?
Don't scratch.
Don't scratch.
That's what I say all the time.
all the time.
You know what happened today?
That's not part of scratching.
Okay, can I
Don't
comb back?
scratch.
That's my comb back.
Would you put this in the? Ooh, be careful.
oh yeah!
It's Jensen time. 2013 in review. Christmas video part 2. Dancing in the living room night and day, and our family walks by and this is what they say.
Dancing in the cabin?
In their Christmas cap.
Merry Christmas!
We love you all.